And we are reconvening. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Never mind. I have my act together. We're actually going to go immediately into committee meeting. I thought we were going to do something else first, but we're not. So I am going to now turn this reconvened meeting of the Board of Governors over to Tom Muller for the University Success Committee report and discussion.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome. Audrey, could you please go through the roll call?
Governor Thomas Muller,
Here?
Governor Nicole Dunlop,
Here.
Representative Brad Roy,
Here.
Chair Cynthia Shapira,
Here?
Alternate Designee Allison Jones,
Here.
Governor Neil Weaver, Governor Janet Yeomans. Chair Muller, you have a quorum of your committee.
Thank you, Audrey. The agenda for today's committee meeting is relatively brief with only two items. Each have two subcomponents. Our first item, beginning on page 4 of the meeting materials, is for two property acquisitions, one at East Stroudsburg, the other at Westchester. I'll turn it over to Sharon Minnick to take you through those two items. Sharon?
Thank you, Tom. The first item, as Tom spoke, is around the property acquisitions, and we have two on the agenda, East Stroudsburg and Westchester. I'm going to begin with East Stroudsburg University's housing acquisition and financing, and this is item 4A, page 4 of your board materials. East Stroudsburg partnered with its affiliate, University Properties Incorporated, to engage in the construction, operation, management, and maintenance of student housing and other projects for the benefits of the students of East Stroudsburg. UPI built 4 housing facilities on the campus and in 4 phases. 2 of the phases have current favorable financing, and the 2 that we're discussing today have opportunities to save money that can translate into student benefits. So the 2 properties that we're talking about, they are seeking to acquire are the Hemlock Property Housing Facility, which has 486 students, and the Hawthorne Housing Facility, which has the ability to have 479 students. These were both constructed in 2010, and the original bonds that were used to finance them are now in a position to be refinanced. From an occupancy perspective, the university has very high occupancy for its housing. It's around 99%, so they are in good shape in terms of the housing occupancy rates. The most cost-effective way to refinance is through the university to acquire the 2 residence facilities using system bond financing at the cost of the outstanding debt of $67 million. They did explore UPI doing the refinancing, and it was more favorable if the university would acquire and use system bond financing. This would result in a net present value savings of $18.2 million, and this translates on an annual basis to about $1.5 million in cost reductions, $1.2 million in the debt service, and another $300,000 in operating costs. The action allows the university to better manage room rates and decrease operational costs. It also benefits the students in lower and more consistent room rates. The university has managed the suites since they were constructed, so the management and operations would be a seamless transition to the students on campus. It finally gives the university more flexibility to meet student demand. So the proposed item is to approve the acquisition and bond financing of the current debt, which is at the $67 million mark. The next item from an acquisition standpoint is the Westchester property acquisition. Westchester is currently exceeding their space requirements, and so they do have a need for space. In order to alleviate some of the space deficiencies, it's requesting approval to acquire 14,400 square feet of facility that's adjacent to the campus on 204 Carter Drive. This facility is about 34 years old. It's in good condition, and it will help with the administrative and warehousing space needs for the campus. It is in a location that is around the administrative building, so it is not removed from kind of the campus footprint, so it gives them a nice flow for their administrative office and warehousing space. We did multiple appraisals which justify the purchase price of $1.65 million. This property acquisition would be funded with university resources. Those are the two items from a property acquisition perspective. I'll turn it back to Tom.
Are there any turn myself on here. Are there any questions? Thanks, Sharon.
This is Jan Yeomans. May I ask a question?
Yes, Jan?
Hi, Sharon. Clearly, there are financial benefits. Are there any risks to these transactions that we don't see in terms of operating the properties or just anything that is not obvious from the numbers? Because the numbers are quite compelling.
I don't think so, because the operations of the East Stroudsburg property is currently being run by the university, so that should be seamless. And the Westchester acquisition is for administrative space, and there are buildings right around this facility that they're looking to acquire that they are using for the same purpose, so it should provide them that benefit from an operations standpoint.
Okay, so it won't make extra demands on our resources, in other words?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, unless there's any objection from the committee members, I'd like to move these two items at the same time. Hearing none,
Second.
I move that the Board of Governors approves East Stroudsburg University's acquisition of on-campus student resident halls from University Properties Incorporated and bond financing of the current debt. And as reflected on page 6, I move that the Board of Governors approve Westchester University's acquisition of 204 Carter Drive, West Goshen Township, Pennsylvania. Is there a second? I think, Jan, you were ahead of me there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun on you, but
I'll
I didn't second the
I'll still take it now. No problem.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Sorry. Oh,
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Brad.
Oh,
I had my blinders on there.
That's okay.
chair there,
No, it's
sorry.
not, just real briefly, I was down at Westchester last week. I'm not a big fan of more government purchases of buildings, but this makes a lot of sense for them to buy this. They are so crowded down there. Where this is positioned, I completely support this. It's a great move by the university, in my opinion.
Thank you. Move to the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
They even accept late ayes. No. Okay, thank you very much. The next item from the University Success Committee relates to bond financing. Item 5A on agenda page 8 will authorize the issuance of bonds by the system to fund the East Stroudsburg University housing acquisition, as was just approved, as well as bond refunding. Item 5B, beginning on page 11, is a routine annual item authorizing the Office of the Chancellor to issue refunding bonds in the upcoming fiscal year if and when market conditions are favorable. Sharon, can you please walk us through these two items?
Thank you, Tom. So the first item on the agenda is the new issuance for Bond Series AX. This includes the $67 million for the East Stroudsburg housing acquisition, which was just previously discussed. It also includes the refunding of eligible issuances, prior issuances. So each year in the spring, the board provides authorization to refund previous issuances to take advantage of favorable market conditions, which would result in cost avoidance for our universities and our students. This year is a bit unusual because the market conditions are very favorable, so we've had two opportunities to do this. The opportunity in front of us provides the ability to refund, which would look to provide a net present value savings of $8.3 million or $14.8 million of the refunded bonds. The total of the AX bond series, combined with East Stroudsburg's acquisition and refunding, along with the contingencies and issuance costs, would be not to exceed $127 million. I'm going to go into the next one as well, which is authorization for next year. So this is authorization to issue refunding for bonds for 2021. As Tom's discussed earlier, historically, the board does this on an annual basis, authorizing the chancellor to issue the refunding bonds when the market conditions are favorable. Since 1987, we have saved $108.6 million in net present value calculated at the time of the refunding. This year, we completed the first refunding. If you recall, back in the fall timeframe, we were doing that, and that resulted in a $13.8 million savings to the universities, which have been communicated out already as it relates to their cost reductions associated with that refunding. So coupled with the $8.3 million, this year we would have hopefully a $22.1 million savings. This action would only be exercised if the market conditions are favorable in fiscal year 2021. It has to generate at least 4% savings, and the bonds would not exceed their original maturity terms as part of the conditions, and we do this in consultation with the University Success Committee Chair. With that, I will turn it back to Tom.
Thanks again, Sharon. At this time, unless there's any objection from the committee members, I'd like to move both of these items at the same time. Hear none?
May I just ask a question? I'm sorry, this is Jan again. May I ask
Thank
a
you.
question for Sharon?
I know it's tough going from mute and getting back on in time. As reflected on page 8, I move that the Board of Governors adopt their attached resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds up to a maximum project cash of $127.0 million. And as reflected on page 11, I move that the Board of Governors adopt the attached resolution to authorize future issuance of refunding bonds when market conditions permit and after the Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance consults with the Chair of the University Success Committee. Do I have a second? Brad, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll
Quick
call.
question, if I may.
Jan had a question.
Jan.
I was waiting on you. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Sharon, are the numbers that you're showing, are those net of the anticipated cost of refinancing? Are they gross?
Net.
Great. Even better. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. I would make one comment for everybody not on the committee, is that we may have seemed like we went through this pretty fast. They're important items, even though we did handle them quickly, but they were all discussed within the committee within the last week or so. So there is discussion before we even get here. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Tom. And as you say, a lot of work goes on and has gone on. Thank you, and thank you to your committee and to all the staff that worked on this. Thank you, Representative Roy. I appreciate your comments as well. Very supportive for this work. Let me now turn it over to Don Hauser, Chairman of our Governance and Leadership Committee, for work and discussion on all the incredible things you're doing.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. First, Audrey, can we go over the membership roll call of the committee, please?
Chair Donald Hauser,
Here.
Governor Alexander Thiefold,
Here.
Senator Scott Martin, Designee Carrie Trago, Vice Chair David Mazer,
Present.
Senator Judith Schwank,
Here?
Chair Cynthia Shapiro,
Here?
Governor Sam Smith,
Here.
President Liaison Dr. Bashar Hanna. Present. Chair Hauser, you have a quorum of your
Wonderful,
committee.
thanks. We did that just so everybody knows the makeup of the committee, and but also just a warning, we're not going to have any votes, so sit back and rest easy. So for the boilerplate of the committee, As a reminder, this committee is focused on ensuring best practices and oversight of the system and its 14 universities. We provide policy guidance regarding the effective distribution of authority, accountability, and responsibility among the Board of Governors, Councils of Trustees, the Chancellor, and our presidents. This committee also provides policy guidance regarding strategies for the recruitment, development, and retention of its talent in the system. And today we'll talk about a few things, and you'll see them on your agenda. First, employee culture engagement survey results, our faculty shared governance commission update, and our Pennsylvania Association of Councils of Trustees update. So those are the three things we'll be going over today. First, I'll turn it over to Randy, who's sitting right there, for our update on the survey results.
You bet. Good morning, board members, presidents, and everyone else. It's good to be here. We're going to talk a little bit about the culture and engagement survey that the state system undertook this past fall. As part of system redesign, we've been focusing significantly on student success, on leveraging university strengths, and the last piece, transforming governance and leadership. Part of that effort is looking at the internal culture of the state system, namely the culture of our faculty and our staff, and how that culture influences the future and the shape of system redesign. As we begin this conversation, we'd like to think about these questions during this session. We're going to talk a little bit about the survey and the tool that was developed to help gauge employees' sentiment and employees' thoughts regarding their level of engagement. But then we're also going to talk a little bit about how that tool can be useful as we do system redesign. So think about it as a board, how these efforts can enhance employee success. Think about how these efforts we're talking about today can equip our presidents and our university leaders with some tools that they would like. And then also think about how this whole conversation might be extended to next include the board members and the trustees in terms of gauging and engaging their thoughts regarding culture and how that shapes the future of the state system. So those are going to be the conversations that we'd hope to have at the end of this session, Mr. Chair, and so I hope you all think about that as we go through this. Real quickly, over the next few minutes, we'll talk about the purpose of the study that was done in conjunction with our consultant Gallagher. We'll talk about how that study should be used and the data from those studies should be used. And then and Frank is going to share a little bit about how the study was constructed. And then Kate is going to talk a little bit about some of the high-level results, the system-level aggregate results we got that we have to share with you today, and as a way to help understand the kind of data that we're collecting. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps for this whole process. Any questions so far? All right. So as Dan has been talking since his arrival, the success of system redesign truly hinges on our ability as faculty, as staff, as administrators to engage each other and engage our roles in a fundamentally different way. And to do that, we should start with some base of data about what we think about how we can perceive our roles and about how we connect with each other. So the whole point of this study and the whole point of doing a massive system-wide all-employee survey was to create the first year of baseline data so that over the next 5 years, which is how long this current engagement lasts, we will be able to see from year in and year out how different efforts to and different levers that we pull and push affect and improve and enhance employee engagement, employee culture, and employee sentiment about their role in the state system. The whole point of data is you want to use it. And if you don't use it, then it's just sitting on a shelf, and we've all been there before where information is gathered and is never used. That is not what's happening here. And then that is decidedly not what is going to be the outcome of this. Importantly, this data only works if it's used at the most local level. And by that, I mean it's okay for us to have this system level data, which you will see today. And it's great for the presidents to have university level data. But this is really useful when you put this in the hands of a really talented department leader who sits down with faculty and staff who really want to engage in this process. And it's really useful when they can say, here is what we think as a unit about our unit. Here is what we think about how we connect to the larger university. And here's what we think as a unit about how we connect to the larger system. And what does that mean to us as a unit of a dozen or 24 people? And how can we improve your experience as an employee, your experience as a staff member, as a faculty member, as an administrator? How can we improve that experience so that it also improves the overall state system? The good news is our partner in this, Gallagher, is going to provide us supports along the way. They're providing us important tools so that we can easily analyze the data. We'll have those tools and trainings available. We'll talk a little bit about the process by which we're going to do that. Remind you about the swirly slide that Kay presented yesterday. This is just a sort of a reminder of how everything that we do at the university individual level, at the university institutional level, and then at the system level, truly intertwine and feed together to support student success. We're going to see this graphic over and over as we continue to move through different aspects of system redesign, so get comfortable with it. I want to ask Frank Lentz if he could just step to the podium for a bit. Frank worked closely with a committee comprised of HR leaders from around the system, faculty, experts in the area of engagement and this kind of data collection, and then worked also with Gallagher to develop the tool and then to implement the tool and deploy the tool. So Frank, you want to talk a little about that?
Sure. So the survey is broken up into 11 categories, you can see on the screen.
Turn your microphone on. Is your mic on? Yeah, thanks.
That'll help. Thank you. The survey is divided up into 11 categories, as you can see up on the screen. The broad scope of categories is defined by Gallagher, but then customized to meet our needs. The categories are really used to organize the survey and really create discernible themes for both the participants and as we begin to dig into the data to create themes within that data. There was a separate survey for faculty and for staff. Each survey had 66 questions. On the whole, the questions were the same for both participant groups. There were minor language changes for the faculty survey that represented reporting relationship differences between staff and faculty, and to note things like the tenure process with regard to faculty. There were 3 open-ended questions that allowed participants to provide free-form feedback. And there are 16 demographic coding items that allow for data parsing and reporting that Kate will dig into a little bit. The upper left-hand quadrant of this slide shows the survey participation. We were 50% for staff and 49% for faculty, 3,474 staff and 2,607 faculty. It's a very good participation number for the first year, and we expect that to grow as we do the next 4 years of surveys. The lower right-hand quadrant of this slide shows the engagement profile, and you can see the percentages of how people are engaged. I just want to give some brief definitions of what those categories mean. Disengaged participants are significantly unfavorable across all of the engagement items. They are not engaged, they don't care to exert great effort in their jobs. They don't have a lot of pride. They aren't connected with the organization's mission. Disconnecting, these participants still exert a reasonable level of effort, but they're at heightened risk for becoming disengaged. Like the disengaged group, they can have a negative impact on those around them. On the positive side, they can be saved by focusing on key areas like career development, communication, and leadership. Seekers are participating, they exert a high level of effort and contribution, They have pride in the organization. They're actively recommending their workplace as a great choice for employment. They're satisfied. They have a strong sense of connection and purpose to the organization's mission, but they are looking to leave to pursue other opportunities. Leaders are often surprised to find seekers within their organization because they do appear to be strongly engaged. They have positive attitudes. They're high performing. In fact, seekers rate 6 of the 7 engagement categories excessively favorable. And so they have high overall engagement, but they are looking to leave the organization. Moderately engaged, these participants are favorable across all measurement items. They exert a solid level of effort in their jobs. They have pride about the organization. They're working for it. They're compelled to promote the organization as a good workplace. They're not interested in leaving for other opportunities. They have a good deal of satisfaction, and they contribute solidly and believe they do that, and they are compelled by the organization's mission. And finally, the highly engaged group, they are significantly favorable across all of the engagement categories. A high level of effort in their work, great pride about working for the organization, compelled to promote the organization as a great place to work, not looking to leave, great deal of job satisfaction. They contribute richly, and they believe they contribute richly, and they believe in the organization's mission and are highly engaged in that mission. So,
And Frank is going to be with us in case we have questions as well, but I'm going to turn it over to Kate here real quick. But before I do, just point out that those 11 categories that Frank talked about, it's important because those categories, and this is where the benefit of working with an organization like Gallagher comes in. They're a national organization that does work in multiple sectors, including higher education. But these are categories that are common, categories that they use within their work. And so they're creating a national database of feedback against which eventually we will be able to measure our own work. Their database of higher education sector clients is growing exponentially. And so we're expecting probably by next year, we'll be able to compare our data that you see here and that Kate is getting ready to walk through. We'll be able to compare it against a national norming group and say, you know what, you're great, Pashy, in this, you're weaker in this, and you can compare that to other organizations in higher education who give responses in those 11 categories. So that's the real power of using an organization like Gallagher to partner with us on this. And Kate is going to go a little bit more into what all that means.
Great, thank you. I want to back up just a little bit and talk about that response rate. So you'll see that 50%, which is fairly high whenever we're talking about individuals electing to take a survey. And so, of course, thanking all of those individuals from the campuses, as well as in the Office of the Chancellor that took the time to take the survey. And then to also note that as we're going through this data, the confidentiality of the data and of the individuals who responded is at the top priority. So anything that we're talking about aggregate level information, and any sort of comments, things like that were made are really only used by select individuals to really aid in the improvement of the survey over time. So as we look at that overall score, you're going to see two different statistics for each thing that we talk about. One is an average. So you'll see the overall score for staff in blue at 4.08 and for faculty at 4.03. A 6 would have been 100% completely favorable. A score of 1 would be completely unfavorable, just to let you know where that falls along that spectrum. And then kind of the pairing that goes with that are just the overall percentage of participants who saw that as favorable overall. So we're looking at 72% for staff and then 70% for faculty. So as we go through, when you see numbers with a decimal, think that those are the average scores on that 6-point scale. And then those percentages that you'll see also, that's the percent that favorably agreed. And I think it's really important to think about those two together. Frank talked a little bit about the engagement profile on the right-hand side. I'm going to talk about on the left-hand, on that bottom quadrant. That engagement score is based only on those 9 elements that were specific to engagement. So on this survey, these 9 questions about engagement, our overall engagement score For staff is 78% favorable, and for faculty at 77% favorable. To give you just a little bit of perspective and thinking about mission-driven organizations, you would expect that number to be very high. And so as we think about kind of what this means within the context of it, think about, as a mission-driven organization being engaged with that organization, you would expect those numbers to be high.
And frankly, you'd expect those numbers to be higher than where we're at. You'd expect those numbers to be.
90% or higher. So as we think about mission organizations, as Frank talked about, as Gallagher continues to build this database, it's important for us to see organizations like ours within that mix, and enough of them so we can really begin to baseline against those national norms specific towards organizations like ours. That engagement profile, just to touch a little bit more and a little bit past just the definitions, that is a combined category. So it's not just those 9 engagement questions, but it's additional questions that were found throughout the survey that have a high correlation to engagement. So they found through their national research, these items in particular, even though they're throughout the survey, also lend themselves towards engagement. So that engagement profile is not just those 9 questions, but really the broader spectrum of questions on the survey that were related to engagement. So I want to dive in just a little bit thinking about some of the specific results that we have. So those categories that you saw on the previous slide that went down, now they're going to go across. So you can see that overall score, and then this breaks it out by those specific groups. So that overall score being the 4.03 and 4.08 for faculty and staff respectively. And then you can go through and see for those key areas. So in addition to engagement that we've already talked about, alignment, career growth, collective success, efficiency, executive leadership, inclusion, innovation, management effectiveness, recognition, and university leadership. So as we began to dive into these, which would be, we hope, a similar process at the institution, we noted some things and looking specifically at the score for executive leadership. So executive leadership is defined as the chancellor, vice chancellor, and leadership staff within the office of the chancellor. So as we look at this score and thinking about what that means as compared to the overall score, knowing that it's one of the lowest categories for both at 3.55. So again, that average, and again, the higher number is what we're looking for, or 3.76 for staff. That allows us to set that as the baseline and then think about what really needs to happen to help that score in particular increase over time.
So to put that into perspective on a scale of 1 to 6, the opinion of faculty and staff of the chancellor, the vice chancellors, and those of us sitting here today. This is not the presidents, this is not the university leaders.
That is correct.
This is the opinion of faculty and staff right now about our ability to consult and communicate about strategy and priorities. We're not doing so great. The good news is we have tools in place and we have people in place to make that number change over time.
Pete and Randy, may I ask just a quick question? Because one of the highest here is the alignment, but I don't understand it as much. What is that?
Yeah, so alignment talks about how well an employee understands how what they do directly contributes to either the university's or, in our case, the system's mission. So if the employees at the chancellor's office were asked that question, they would be thinking, how does this contribute to the mission of the system? Employees at the universities more were asked, how does it contribute to the mission? Their actions contribute to the mission.
And not, in surveys like this, you expect, in mission-driven organizations, you expect to see alignment considerably high. And I think that, the issues that we're contending with is that, obviously it's good news that we're seeing 70+% favorability, but those numbers should really, on the percent side, should drive into the high 80s, low 90s. And for something like alignment, you really want to see them into the mid 90s if possible. So, so we're building on a good and firm base, but this really, the survey instrument really gives us an opportunity to dig in and figure out how, and where to work. I mean, it's a bit of a glossa point that Frank made. This kind of work takes a long time. It is years in the making, and it requires dedicated, constant engagement. The other thing is that the methodology that's typically used in these, generally in any industry, is that it's all about driving the engagement score. If your folks are happy and they feel engaged, then they will, it's about driving the performance of the industry. And the science shows that people can become disengaged along any one of those other, because of dissatisfaction along any one of those other axes. And so one uses an instrument like this in order to determine, in specific work groups, where should we begin to focus our efforts to improve, whether it's how people feeling that the environment is inclusive or that they can be innovative, where should we focus our efforts to improve in areas ultimately trying to drive that engagement score. The other thing you learn in these, and I've been through this for some years, ultimately this is people experience their work in their very intimate work setting, their department, academic or other department. So a lot of this is about, are we cultivating managers to really bring, and managers mean different things in academic lines and non-academic lines, but are we cultivating our leaders exist at all levels of the organization? Are we cultivating and supporting our managers and our leaders so they're able to create work environments that are engaging? And ultimately, and there's a fairly strong research literature on this, we can do all sorts of really interesting data-driven technocratic things to improve student outcomes. Unless we nail this problem, because education is a human business, it is a high-touch personal business. Unless we nail these issues, we will only ever see so much of an improvement. So as we think about yesterday's discussion, and we looked at a pathways framework, look at where students are stopping out, and we're trying to figure out those junctures, what can we do? Improve developmental education, improve our advising, improve our counseling. Super important, lots of technocratic things and fixes that we can introduce there. If we don't address issues of staff engagement, there'll be significant limitations on the outcomes that we can get. And since it's all about our students, interestingly, it requires us to focus intensively on our employees.
So basically, you said probably more articulately what I wanted to, what my comments would have been, both with regard to getting behind that score and figuring it out. And we have to get behind it as well in terms of the board. Are we actually clearly and strongly and consistently and in unison messaging our belief in the universities, in the systems, and therefore the university's plural mission and strategy? What is our strategy? And are we being really clear about it so that before you even get to people feeling alienated and not in alignment because of all of these other reasons, we got to start there. Does everybody understand? Are we all on the same page about what we're trying to get done here? I think that's critically important, and that, to me, starts at a board level. And, the rest of it is as local as possible, as Dan said, but that really starts at the board level, and that's something we need to do better and better. The second thing, I do want to reiterate that nothing can be achieved. None of the great things that we're trying to do can be achieved unless we have everybody with us, all of the faculty and all of the student services, student affairs people, and everybody at the university levels understanding and believing in the organization and the culture and the vision. And I think you go to any really highly functioning company or organization, and you find you get down to the talent level, and you find great talent that is very happy and satisfied in their job, and that to me also is number one. I don't know, I think it was Peter Drucker who said culture eats strategy for lunch, or something along those lines. We just always have to keep that foremost in mind. So all of this work that's being done, to me, is critically important, and it demonstrates our ability to come into the 21st century in thinking about what's going to bring us success, and out of a bureaucratic mentality and into a highly functioning human organization kind of mentality as we pursue all of this. So I just urge everybody to take this stuff really seriously, because to me, this here is the bottom line on success.
Question? So on those categories, you're saying what those numbers are. Do any of them reflect in any way, as you look back on the questions on the survey, what those who were surveyed thought about the General Assembly? Because after all, we're the authorizing agency. So where did we fit into this, or not at all?
I do not believe that there were questions. I just looked back at Frank for confirmation. I don't believe that there were specific questions that aligned directly to the General Assembly. But I believe we've just written that down. Thank you.
Except to the extent that there are 4 members of the General Assembly on our board, so.
Right, and you can't necessarily.
You can borrow as much of that bad score as you want, Senator. We own a lot of it.
Right, but I hear what you're saying, Randy, but I think I sit on this board, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think we come because we believe and we want to play our part and our role. So I wonder if this was in the back of the minds of the folks that were responding when they answered. So, just a thought.
I can respond to that. I took the survey as a faculty member. So, one thing about the executive leadership number, I think part of it, there's going to be a lag time between things. So when people had touch points on leadership, the last touch point for a lot of the faculty might have been the strike. Right? And so you're going to have a dip there, no question about it. And so the supposition will be moving forward that number would probably increase. With I would be shocked if it does not. So with university leadership, there is a little bit of a nebulousness there because somebody might have a very good relationship with their provost or their president, but not their dean. And so it may be that we're not teasing down necessarily where the problem in leadership may be, because they tend to be very personal problems. So they might have a very good relationship with one, not with another. But one thing about the survey I just want to talk about is the fact that, and to address your question, no one's thinking about the legislature when they did that. They were not going to conceptualize that as part of the leadership. So that's just not how they think about things. They should, but that's something that would probably be a good way for them to realize and continuously be recognized that we are a state system, we're state funded. That needs to be brought back down to the faculty level to recognize who they are, what they are, and who they're responsive to. But generally speaking, my concern about the survey is I thought it's a great survey. It's going to be about the use. So actually, I think a 49% was really high. Right? And my concern would be you're going to get a dip. Okay? And the reason is going to be that it's novel and interesting, so people are excited to have an opportunity to do something they didn't get a chance to do before, which is really evaluate people in a across-the-board level. But unless there's like quick use of the survey where it showed that it's going to be demonstrably put into place and it's going to be used in performance review of presidents or provost, or it's going to be used at a department level in terms of having a discourse. If that doesn't happen this semester, then the survey in the fall is going to have a dip in terms of number of people participating because they're going to see it as simply redoing something they've already done.
I just reinforce Jamie's point. I mean, what we discover in this kind of work is use is critical. That a couple of aspects which almost seem obvious, but it's worth calling them out. So one of them is that the discussion really needs to be held, obviously at the facility level, the university level, but even more importantly within the department, and define department as you will. And that discussion often really needs to begin with, thank you so much for your participation. This is really important. And then the conversation and the follow-on actions need to live into that. This is really important, precisely for the reason that Jamie's just mentioned, because if it doesn't happen, then it actually builds cynicism and creates not just a dip in response, but a dip in the numbers. It is important to get 100% behind it and reflect on it, meaningfully think about actions to it. And one of the most difficult things, and we have some support from Gallagher to train our leaders and managers and folks to have these conversations. We'll provide some support. They'll help us with the data. We'll help with the conversations. Is to not try to create excuses. Is to look at the numbers and say, yeah, it could be about the strike, or it could be that we just started our community. I'm thinking about the executive leadership. Could be about the fact that some of this stuff is new and we've only implemented our communications. But you have to look at those numbers and say, wow, that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable for an institution with 10,000+ employees to feel that way about their executive leadership. And we should not duck that. We should take that seriously, and by taking it seriously, be responsive to the people who spent their time and honestly and to the best of their ability. In my conversations with folks, we all filled it out, answered the survey. Yeah.
And about the number, so when you look at that, a lot of people are going to say something like 75%, that's pretty good. Right? But they need to be told that that's not, right? And so we don't even have a notion about where we should be, and that's really not an acceptable number. Somebody might think 11% people disaffected by their work at the university, that's typical. And even if it were typical, it may not be acceptable. So, if university presidents or provosts presented this with their own aggregate data at the university level, everybody was on the same page and said, and we all agreed that that's not the number, this should be the number, and the problem seems to lie in this particular area, then you can actually begin getting some use out of it. And I think that there's a really good opportunity to use this to really change the culture of the university.
So as we think about, I think that specific sentiment, yesterday we talked about the various board affirmed measures. And so adding that engagement score to those measures then means that we'll baseline it based on this information, set goals around that, and then that'll be reflected also at the university level and what strategies they have in place where they think that engagement score will go over time. So to me, I think just to kind of bring those two pieces together by adding in that category around employee engagement specifically, that's the number that I think that we're thinking about to put in there so we can really begin to set that baseline and look at that over time. I would really like to keep us at this high level of discussion, but I want to give you all an opportunity to see how these types of information can be broken down by various demographic groups. So just in looking, again, just to kind of quickly go through this, but to keep us at the overall level, this is the information that you've already seen. On the left, the overall score, and on the right, the engagement score. This is for staff. By the way, the questions were different for these two groups, as Frank mentioned, so that's why we do pull those two groups apart. And so the 78% favorable along engagement, so we can dive in and look at that by, for example, their positions that they hold. And then you'll notice on these slides little green and red stars. Those are statistically significant differences from the mean. So that means that score, for example, offices and managers being a 4.72, that is statistically significantly higher than the average for that category at 4.38. And then the converse for those in the red stars. So just to give you a little kind of as you look at this type of information. It's also broken out by years of service. And so you'll see here, this is ordered by years of service, starting with less than 1 year, then 1 to 2, and then at the very bottom is more than 20 years. So you can see it you see that U forming, indicating that individuals that have been here a shorter amount of time and then more than 20 years are most likely to be engaged with their university.
And if you compare these again to sort of national data, you'd expect to see that U much more pronounced, that people who are here a short period of time and people who are here more than 6 or 7 or 8 years should be significantly more engaged or have higher overall results. And so something's happening. So the question is, well, what happens? Is that, basically people start out super engaged and then there's some significant decline and it doesn't really pick back up in the way that you'd expect to see it in other organizations. So that's an interesting, just trend comparative feature.
Sure. Okay. Sorry about that. You can also see differences by generation. And these are ordered in order of their engagement. So the actual the years of those generations are out of order, just to let you know. Generation Z being the younger generation that's up here at the very top with the highest levels of engagement.
Youthful optimism.
Youthful optimism, that's right. We were also able to disaggregate these results by race, ethnicity, and sex. So you'll see on here the various breakouts and then those statistically significant pieces. But as we begin to disaggregate this type of information, I think it's important that we also take a look at the size of the sample. So when we're talking about some of these specific numbers, for individuals indicating that they were white, over 3,000 respondents in those categories compared to some of the other breakouts. So as you look at those numbers and thinking about the relationship to the overall score, I think it's important to note those counts as well. The exact same information is also provided on the faculty side. So looking at that 77% favorable with that engagement score of a 4.37, which can also be then broken out by years of service. So here, back to the slide and thinking about that the sentiment and how that pattern is on the staff side is also here on the faculty side. So those numbers actually decline as opposed to coming back out and making that full circle where you see those levels of engagement higher towards the end of service.
And I could just point out that at 5 years, that's when you get tenure, okay? That's when you make associate professor. And so you're going to see a decline there. And at some point, probably, when we get into that really big dip that's statistically significant, that's where we're going to have an average of people making full professor, right? And so there's a natural decline in those areas and that goes back to promotion, right? So promotion is a huge incentive for people to be actively engaged. And so when they're working towards promotion, they're working towards tenure, they're going to be busting it to try to make sure that they do that. But then we don't have incentivization procedures in place to help people after that point to make sure that you get back and re-engaged after the point of making tenure.
And if you think about it from a student success perspective, the vast majority of our faculty have been here more than 6 years. So in terms of just the touch points with
exactly
students,
right, Dan. That's a problem.
yeah, our least engaged faculty represent the vast majority of student credit hours taught.
They're also.
And that would be true of staff too, so I'm not.
And based on their seniority, they're the most well-paid also. So can we say there's probably maybe not a correlation necessarily between, their salaries and their compensation and their level of engagement, like to rule out?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to say that they get more compensation they're more engaged.
Yeah.
Great. And similar to before, this can also be broken out by those generation groups, and then also by race, ethnicity. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Randy.
Can we just go back one real quick to this? So this is actually, there's some real interesting. Everything's interesting. This to me is particularly interesting because this is also not a typical trend. And these numbers, they're not huge, but 103 African American, 152 Asian. You typically see it reversed in an organization where, so I think that's very interesting.
So we'll wrap up this, just talking about next steps, and just to recap, thinking about the sort of life path of this project. Dan started a little over a year ago. Within a few months, he mobilized Frank and that committee that I mentioned earlier of other HRP professionals, really great faculty who helped develop and vet the survey. And within a year, it was fully developed, vetted, and in the field. So this fall is when the data the survey was put out to employees and collected this fall. Then Gallagher did the final cleaning of the data, and they just provided it to us over the holiday break. So these are fresh data. So the next steps will be for our office to work with the presidents and to articulate the process through which these data will be pushed down into the system and into the universities and then further into the university departments. As I mentioned, a big part of this will be some training opportunities for the managers in the tool that Gallagher provides for doing data analysis and data sorting. Basically, we just gave you a small snapshot of how these data can be sliced and diced to inform your decision making. The tool that they provide is much more in-depth. So that first conversation will take place this month and next with the presidents and give the opportunity for a rollout in February to the universities. And we want to be consistent about this so that, we have employees across the university system, that people at one university, people in the office of the chancellor, people at another university are getting access to the similar levels of data so that they feel as informed as their partners at other institutions. But we'll work with the presidents on that this month and next. And then this, as you can see on the chart, this spring, it'll be about at each university level and the department level reviewing and reflecting on those data, developing and identifying strengths and areas of improvement, and creating plans, engagement plans for how do we start pulling the levers of those areas that we can to start moving the scores. And then you can see on down the path where our work takes us. Ultimately, this 5-year engagement includes this first measurement. About a year out, there'll be a pulse survey that is sort of an interim check on these data. 3rd year, it'll be another issuing of the full survey. 4th year, another pulse check. And then the 5th year, we will wrap up with the final reissuing of the survey. All along the way, we can refine as needed. But keeping in mind the value of this is the longitudinal nature of it, the fact that we can track these same questions over 5 years and see where it's moving. So, Mr. Chairman, that is the direction we're headed. There's questions you might have.
Any final questions?
Just a comment, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see a relatively aggressive timeframe on actually doing something with this information. I would like to, at this point, can we just have at least a report and an update at our April Board of Governors meeting to see what those engagement plans are, the timeline, et cetera, so that, I feel like the board is really keeping our eyes on this.
I do, Mr. Chair, I do want to caution us to make sure, I think this is a great timeline, and if the survey instrument is yielding information that's going to be useful, we should continue to utilize it and tweak it as needed. I think today we've heard a few questions emerge. There's some things that you shared with us that I haven't really, I'm still processing, but I think requires some contextualization. I don't know if there's room in this timeline to think about what that contextualization goes by. If there are key findings that emerge, could we go back and engage in something that maybe is a little more qualitative, that allows us to really understand what are the nuances with regards to that particular feeling of disengagement or engagement, just so we don't miss the opportunity to truly understand what the finding is yielding. I thought about it when we were talking about the faculty over time. We shouldn't rush to some judgment of why that's there.
Well, so I think there's a couple things. So one is we can and we ought to and we will do a great deal of research on these data, and we have all sorts of opportunities to engage our research faculty who have some of whom have real expertise in this stuff. So that's a huge opportunity. But the second thing to not lose sight of is that the real importance of the data are really the discussion that takes place at the local. So we can do all the research, and we should disseminate it as we get useful results. But it's really what people think within their departments about what this is saying that's really important. And to Jamie's point earlier, the opportunity to engage in a conversation and a process which has one really objective, which is to improve engagement at the workplace. It is, if it's done well, it's a very empowering and very engaging opportunity. And obviously, just going at a very high level through some of the results, taking advantage of those opportunities to engage and re-engage our employees is absolutely critical.
And part of this timeline is a mindfulness of campus rhythms. We have faculty on campus in January, February, March, and April. And we don't want to miss that opportunity to engage with that important sector of the employee base. Staff are around for more of the year, but we would, if we had a different or longer timeline, then we would miss those key windows of opportunity to Dr. Phillips' point, to engage now when we can. Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Randy, Kate, Frank, for that. We appreciate it. Next, we're going to have an update on a topic that our board chair articulated yesterday in her remarks, the Faculty Shared Governance Commission. And so we'll start by showing on the slide deck here the commission's charge. You'll see that. Also, for those following at home, it's on our website, building on the chancellor's commitment to transparency that he talked about yesterday. We're putting all this on the website. And but just a side note, and knowing on the last topic about contextualizing some of the comments, here we are talking about faculty shared governance, and to our chairwoman having a interim faculty liaison, we just saw the value of that in our last discussion going over those surveys. And so it's an invaluable piece of information that we get by having Jamie sit here. So thank you, Jamie, for your...
I like to be invaluable.
Yeah, thank you. But it just goes to show the value of all this that we're doing, and thank you for that. Okay, so faculty shared governance. It's built around a shared understanding that we are stronger when we work together and leverage the collective intelligence of all of our voices. The work of the commission is focused on that mission. And while we have variations of shared governance occurring at the university level across the system, the fact that our comprehensive shared level of governance does not exist right now. And as we heard yesterday, we're striving to strengthen the system's governance and accountability as part of system redesign, prioritizing efforts that will result in decision-making that better serves our system and our students. And so since our last meeting, we've had several meetings of this commission where we've really taken a deep dive and listened to each other and concepts, and we've done the following. We'll provide a commission members a system level orientation around existing governance roles and responsibilities, work on developing a better understanding of each other's perspectives on shared governance, leading to a shared understanding of the issues, and identify opportunities, challenges, and aspirations that a shared governance system level governance system presents. So we've had active discussion with the members, and we've developed a list of guiding principles. I don't know if that document is on the website, but...
Not yet. The commission members are vetting that draft with their stakeholders, so the faculty are vetting it with faculty, presidents with presidents, so that we can make sure it's a good first draft, and then we'll share that on the website very soon.
So we have a guiding principles document that's being shared, and we'll work on that throughout the year. And we also have a draft matrix of issues that system-level faculty shared governance can address. Each of our commission members is currently circulating these drafts among peers and gathering input and talking about missed opportunities, challenges, et cetera, and additional enhancements that we should consider. And those stakeholder groups include faculty union leaders, board members, trustees, presidents, CAOs, CFOs, and deans. And that phase will be completed by the end of the month. In addition, the interim faculty council has been meeting, and I think Jamie can attest to that. He's nodding his head yes. And so we want to thank him for organizing that body and being here with us today. Thank you again. And for next steps, we'll spend much of the spring semester developing concepts for recommendations that will offer the board, gathering large-scale stakeholder feedback, and bringing recommendations back to this board in July. That's the target frame. And I'm sorry we've missed your initial target date of April, but here we are in July.
Well, you warned me, but still.
So that was quick. It was a quick overview, but I'm sure you have some questions, so if there are any, we'll take them. I'll close the gavel pretty quick if there are none.
All right. Any further questions on this? Okay, it's a work in progress, but it's coming along. It's critically important. I think it's really, as we've all discussed, going to feed in and have an impact on the engagement survey. And thank you for continuing this work. It is somewhat academic in nature, so I'll accept it's still lightning speed for, higher education to come up with an entire shared governance process, right, emanating from the system level in less than a year. So I'll grant you that, but that's as far as I'll go. And thank you very much for this work. It's really important and a real demonstration of how we mean business in terms of transforming governance and leadership.
Well, as we've learned when we started this, there's no wheel to replicate. So we're building a system brand new that we hope will be setting the bar for
We
others.
think it will. We think this is going to be the template to go out there.
So moving on, Jeff Smith will come forward and get his buy 10, get one free punch card punched for as many appearances before the board to give a PACT update. So Jeff, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always sort of an honor to be here in front of this group, so thanks. Really, it's going to be sort of a quick update today, not that we haven't been busy, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of highlights. The biggest thing for the trustees, something that I've talked about for the last couple of meetings, the trustee reappointments. The great news for Trustee Nation is that the governor's office has forwarded 54 names over to the Senate for confirmation. They're back in session next week. They'll be looking at their calendar, see how quickly they can do it. Hopefully it'll be soon. Governor's office has had a huge job gathering up all the information, making sure all the trustees filled the forms out correctly. Once, twice, 3 times. But I think we all eventually got them done properly. Interestingly, there's 32 reappointments, and there'll be 22 new individuals. So it's like 15% of the trustees are going to be new going into probably this summer. So that's good. That will give us a lot of new blood, invigorate people. And for the 32 that are reappointed, they no longer have that cloud hanging over their heads. So I think everybody should be really engaged. And then, not to be unappreciative, we still have 20 left from last year. And I believe the plan for the governor's office is once this group gets through, they'll deal with them as well. Next. Do I have the clicker or do you, Randy? Okay. One of the big items that we're working on, again, dealing with new trustees, our student trustee selection. We have 9 vacancies this year. There's 5 that were juniors this year that will continue. PACT has been working, trying to increase the interest in those positions. We've talked about at the PACT meetings. We've been sharing best practices. One of our plans is that we're hoping that universities will identify their new student trustees for next year prior to our annual meeting in April, so that we can not only invite the current student trustees to that meeting, but the incoming student trustees as well. To a certain point, if you have a trustee that's going off, a student trustee going off in May, to invite them to the annual meeting in April, they're really not getting a lot of the benefits. But if we can get the new people coming in, they'll benefit from it for a full year. We're going to be reaching out to social media. We tried to do a project to generate a video showing numerous students, trustees talking about their experience that we had planned to use on social media. We've got a couple universities working on it. I'm not sure if we'll have it rolled out for this year. It may be the timetable is just a little tight, maybe a project for next year. But if you go to the next slide, Randy, this is a sample of at least what we'll be using at Slippery Rock. And hopefully we'll have some others to go with it. Takes a little bit to load, we hope. There it is. It's coming.
Hi, my name is Dylan Colcom. I'm a senior at Slippery Rock University. I'm a physical activity and fitness management major, and I am currently the student trustee. My role on the Council of Trustees is to provide a student perspective on university policy and administration and make the Slippery Rock University a better place for students. To be considered for the student trustee position, you must be currently enrolled in Slippery Rock University with academic good standing, currently as a sophomore or a junior. You should want to be a student trustee so you can understand the administration, policy, and processes of both Slippery Rock University and the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, to provide a student perspective to the Council of Trustees, and to be an advocate for the interest of the student body.
So that's it. It's very short, but we think that will get the attention of some students. And again, if I know Lock Haven was working on one. If we're able to have a couple, we can maybe put them together and have sort of a PASHI video that can be used everywhere. Final thing I just wanted to talk about a little bit is the annual PAC meeting that'll be coming up April 23rd and 24th. That we'll make sure you all have invitations, hopefully. If it fits into your schedule, you can stop in for part of it. Some of the things we're hoping, we had a meeting yesterday, the incoming, or the first vice president, second vice president are responsible for putting this together. New trustee orientation will be a big thing because hopefully we'll have our 20-some new trustees, some legal do's and don'ts for trustees and their foundation, the relationship between those. Chat with Ken Mash, which will be the second highlight, only beaten by the brunch with the chancellor. We're going to have a session on the new presidential evaluation process. We'll have a student trustees session and an election of new officers. So I think it'll be a worthwhile meeting. I think have been pretty well attended the last couple of years. A lot of good information. Again, would love to have all you folks be there to sit through part of it. So that is everything I had. So if nobody has any questions for me.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
At our last IFC meeting, which we had in December, one thing that came up, it was a very common opinion amongst IFC members, was that we'd like at some point for the possibility of considering putting faculty members on councils of trustees. Yeah. So to model what we're doing here, at least what we're conceptualizing here at the Board of Governors, it would be a wonderful thing at some point in time, even if it's just on an ad hoc basis, non-voting obviously, just have a faculty member, instead of being there for public comments or presenting for faculty senate, which I've done multiple times, actually sit on the council of trustees. And I was just wondering if you might broach that with your fellow.
We actually, when we had a meeting for the executive board a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when it was. I talked about how over at what was it, Bloomsburg or Kutztown, where we met, about how you filled this role and how we should go back and talk to our councils. In fact, I brought up at Slippery Rock the idea that we should really look at doing this. And actually just sitting back there with Dr. Mash, we were talking a little bit, and it really hadn't occurred to me, but it might make sense that your group, that would be the representative that would sit on it to really tie us together.
So we have that way we're trying to find a way to make our committee hook up in a way that connects with the universities, so that we don't just are a standing board for a commission, and we're also bringing back information to the university and helping connect things up tighter. And doing that at the level of council of trustees would be immensely helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's something maybe we can talk with Randy and the chancellor about, maybe putting together sort of a unified message to the universities, to the council of trustees, and
making recommendations.
Recommend that we do that. So
Certainly what we can talk about in the Shared Governance Commission as well before we get to a final report.
And the practice, as you know, Jeff, is not unknown. Several of our universities have faculty members of their trustees. So, and this conversation has come up as well in other contexts. So there seems to be an opportunity to move.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that wraps up the agenda of the committee. So unless there's anything to come before it, committee adjourned.
Great, thank you very much, Dawn, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, and thanks again to all the great work that you're doing. There's so much that's happening in your committee, and I really appreciate it. It's like a special interest of mine and something I've been wanting to do for a long time, so that's great. And I also fully endorse the point that I think, Jamie, you raised just now and that we briefly discussed. And I think that making that kind of connection is a terrific idea. I really do.
Watch Tom Ridge, An Oral History on cable and streaming, January 17th at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m.
We're going to go on to public comment now. Before we proceed, we want to provide an opportunity for members of the public to speak. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the Board of Governors? Okay. Today we will not have remarks from the president of SCUPA because she's speaking at an event on campus today. But Shalita sends her regards. Thank you, Shalita. We miss you. And now we would like to hear remarks from the president of APSCUF, Dr. Kenneth Mash.
Thank you.
That'll teach you not to get here on time.
Well done. Happy birthday. Chairwoman Shapiro, Governors, Chancellor Greenstein, President, guests. I do have some prepared remarks, but I did want to comment a little bit about some of the conversation that had just occurred about the survey that's out there. When I was talking to Jeff and as the data was being presented, and I had made a comment that there's a lag effect with the data, and then Professor Phillips made the same comment. He was wondering whether we were, communicating with each other somehow. But I think it comes with an understanding of how to interpret data. And I appreciate the fact that, and I know that there were faculty who were involved in formulating the survey. But I would request, too, that if we're going to talk about engagement, and it sort of covers two things. If we're talking about engagement and we're talking about this interpretation, survey data is just loaded with pitfalls. There are books written both on how to conduct surveys, but also on errors made in interpretation of survey research. So I think it would make a lot of sense to cover both sides of this. If you're going to do something like that, and we have experts at our campuses who do survey research data when it comes to the presentation of something like survey research data, that the board itself make use of those experts even in the presentation. And I think that that would even go a long way to both serving our function, if we're going to view the system, and I do appreciate the chair and the chancellor reiterating we're an educational institution in our presentation to the public about how you approach these things. But also, I think it's a matter of demonstrating actual engagement, that the faculty are actually engaged with the board and are using their expertise and sharing it with the board. So I thank you for that. My name is Kenneth Nash, and I'm the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. I'm the person in the Commonwealth who can say that the quickest. We represent the 5,000, over 5,000 faculty and coaches in our great system. Today, we're going to be signing the faculty contract after the meeting, and I do, again, want to take the opportunity to thank the chancellor and the board, and particularly the chair, for the productive contract negotiations that we had. I want to thank all the members of the team on the administrative side, both for the faculty contract and the contract with the coaches, which I believe both were very productive and had constructive conversation about shared concerns. I believe that the intent was clearly out there to start a new day, for us to be able to share our concerns in a manner that is productive rather than hurtful, even to the system. We all, as I said before, need to be pulling in the same direction And that direction should always be in the direction of doing what is in the best interest of our students. And I think that that goes a long way, and what we started went a long way to fixing a problem, a real serious problem. And that effort's going to continue in the next few weeks as the chancellor and I, as well as members of our teams, will jointly speak to faculty and administration on the campuses, not just about the specific changes that are in the contract, but also to speak about the spirit that led to that. One of the problems that we have is not just that we have language in the contract, but that for so long, while we might have language in a contract, we did not necessarily articulate what our shared understanding of that contract means. So again, my thanks for your willingness to do that. So, this is really a matter of an honest attempt to change the culture of our state system. And it's changing a culture which, in fact, had reached, in many instances, toxic levels with regard to that culture. We can't, however, fool ourselves. After years of distrust and bad feelings, we all have to remain aware that the ice is thin, that there are pitfalls along the way. And I don't want to be overly negative here. I want to state some real appreciation to some of our university presidents who have almost immediately initiated, or tried to repeat the transparency that existed in our conversations, reached out to faculty for their expertise, and that is wholly appreciated. But at the same time, I continue to be disheartened by reports from other campuses where decisions have been made, particularly decisions that impact academic quality, with little or no consultation with the faculty, or where decisions are being made that have obvious impact on the lives of the faculty and the coaches on a campus, which really seem to be almost callous in the way that they are carried out, or where there have been willful violations of the collective bargaining agreement, which again, all can undermine all the efforts that we are putting together. When it comes to that term systemness that the chancellor has used so often, we at ABSCUF, that's not a concept that's new to us. We have always talked to each other. We have always communicated with each other. We have always understood that what happens on one campus impacts things that happen on the other campuses. We have always seen those connections, and we have an understanding of, even the decisions that we make as an organization. What is that impact? If it's done on one campus, what is going to be done on another campus? What happens, it's going to be what happens on the individual campuses that is going to be the measure for the faculty across the system of the success of the project that we are engaged in. Cultural change is, and I've heard it here, a very difficult thing to pull off, and it takes time. And you, the board and the chancellor, have undertaken a lot of different things at one time. And as I said before, to be successful in this type of change, this type of dramatic change, doing so many things at one time, that can't possibly happen unless we are all pulling in the same direction. And I want to reiterate, cultural change means that attitude of working together has to cascade down to all 14 of our campuses, and it has to be done with the same alacrity with which we are confronting our financial enrollment and retention issues. Let's understand there's still out there a lot of bad feeling. There is still out there those who are harboring resentments that go back for years. And there are those who just simply by human nature are going to be willing to pounce on failure to demonstrate that it's impossible for us to be in a situation where we work together. And if some of our universities just don't alter the way that they do business, failure will be inevitable for all of us. Again, not failure for a particular university, but failure for the entire state system of higher education. We collectively need to do everything in our power to make sure that that failure doesn't happen and to make sure that we are as successful as we possibly can be so that we can do and continue to do what's in the best interest of our students and make sure that they reach their full potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mesh. Appreciate those remarks. As those are not part of the public comment, if anyone on the board has a question or a comment, you are welcome to speak. Okay, thank you very much. Let me note at this point, also for the record, that the board met in executive session yesterday from 10:30 until 11:30 a.m. We will now move to the consent agenda. Are there any items that the board wishes to be removed for separate consideration? Okay. If not, could I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries. We will now go to agenda item number 15, which is board consideration of committee items. Again, many thanks to the board members for all of your hard work and diligence during the committee meetings yesterday and this morning. So much is going on. I think our biggest job is to just, keep up with all of it at this point. But all cylinders are in gear, so thank you again for your extraordinary work. I would like to ask for a motion to approve all of the university's success committee action items from this morning in one motion, unless any board member wishes for them to be separate.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion on these items? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mazur. Okay, thank you very much. The motion carries. All right, our next agenda item will be new business, and there are items related to collective bargaining, and for that, I will ask Brian Mubu to walk us through the items in section 16A, starting on page 18 of your packet. Brian, if you could go ahead and cover the information in items 16A1 and 16A2, and we will then do our motions at the end of your presentation and proceed with discussion as needed after there is motion on the table.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So there's two items in front of you, 16A1 and 16A2, as you referenced. 16A1 is a side letter with the APSCA faculty, and this side letter is an enhanced sick leave payout program that we are looking to implement for the 1920 fiscal year. This side letter program, in essence, involves if the system has 200 faculty that retire within this fiscal year, then those faculty can get an enhancement to the sick leave payout that is listed in the collective bargaining agreement. The elements of that tentative agreement are attached as well to your materials. So this program is available for regular full-time faculty only, and those faculty have to provide their notice of intent to retire under this program by March 2nd this spring. The second item in front of you is under 16A2, and this is ratification for several other agreements with other bargaining units. The first one is with the nurses, OPIU. They represent the nurses at our universities. And some of the elements of that negotiated agreement involve, it's a 4-year agreement beginning in 2019, running through 2023. And through those 4 years, the total pay increases for this group of employees is 11.5%. And those increases are incurred in the last 3 years of the agreement. So there's no increase for this fiscal year in that particular agreement. So that covers both the nurses under the OPIU, and then we also have a memorandum of understanding under OPIU as well. This represents the supervisors, and the elements of that agreement are similar to those for the regular nurses covered under the agreement. Again, a 4-year agreement, 11.5% increase over the 4 years, with the increases happening only in the latter 3 years. So no increases in this fiscal year. There's also an agreement in front of you that we achieved with the Apache Officers Association. This is a group that represents the police officers and security officers at our institutions. And this is a 3-year agreement. And the main elements of the 3-year agreement, it actually involves collapsing the wage scale for this unit. We actually have had at our universities, we've had several issues with recruitment and retention. So we've worked with the union to collapse the scale from a 12-step scale to a 10-step scale with a 5% difference between each of the steps. So the total increase for the 3 years for this unit is 15%. And the last unit in front of you is for our police supervisors. This group is represented by SPIFPA. This group only had a wage reopener in the last year of their current collective bargaining agreement. So their agreement expires in August of 2020. And for this group, we did a similar change for them as well, where we collapsed their pay scale as well from 12 steps to 10 steps, and the difference of 5% between each step. So that is what is in front of the board. Are there any questions?
Well, let's put a motion. Do you want to speak before we put a motion on the table? Doesn't matter. Let's get the conversation started with a motion. I think that's, probably the better way to do it. So I would like to move approval of the motions associated with items 16A1 and 16A2 is listed in the Board of Materials. I can read those motions if you want, but do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's open it up for discussion. Vice Chair Smith?
The incentive, retirement incentive, do I understand that that's 200 or nothing? I mean, at least 200 or nothing, like if we can't hit, if not that, if we don't hit 200 faculty employees that, would voluntarily do it, then we're not doing the program? Is that how it's structured?
That is correct. It is structured that we have to achieve 200. If we do not hit 200 based on the side letter, then those individuals get the regular payout in the CBA without any incentive.
Yeah, it's, I think it's, well known where we stand in terms of our, the system-wide enrollment numbers. And that, unfortunately, that does, make it incumbent on each of our individual schools in various ratios to, try to get the kind of student-faculty alignment. We talked about that some at when we went through the school's budgets, I think at Kutztown. We talked about what that student-faculty ratio was, and it's not something anybody relishes, but I think it's important that in context of what the chancellor's been saying and things that we need to do to more efficiently run the overall operation. I think it's something that we need to encourage, and hopefully there'll be people available, or people that are willing to move and go on, and it's going to be important for us to get those the employee and the student ratios in line. Same with we have with some of our capital issues or capital projects. Building and space on some schools. We need to tear some buildings down or something just to right size or appropriately size the physical plant. And it's something I know we have talked about that at IUP for a couple of years, how to keep these things in line. So I appreciate the effort that has gone into it on both sides from your office and from the employee side of it.
Yeah, just to follow up on Sam's comments, in our last meeting, we got our first look at two-year budgeting from our institutions, and a lot of those budgets were driving at a number through attrition. And I think this plan would help to get those numbers through attrition, those final budget numbers they count on. So I'm certainly supportive of that. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. So thanks, Brian, but also thanks, colleagues at APSCUF. This was an important discussion. I guess just to build on some of those comments, I wasn't kidding yesterday in my State of the System address that this year is going to be critical to us. It is no longer a matter of choice about whether we align our costs with our revenues, and they are unfortunately out of line. We have a limited number of tools that are available to us, and at the same time, we believe very strongly in all of our employees. They are our most important resource, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can be most respectful of our employees, at the same time enhancing the tools that we have at our disposal in order to do something that we aren't absolutely going to have to do, to align our costs with our revenues, and recognizing that 75% of our costs are tied up in salary and associated benefits. So that's where we stand. I do want to echo comments that Dr. Mash made. This is going to test us. Dr. Mash, in my view, is absolutely correct. That the quality, the effectiveness of our ability to work with our faculty, while it's absolutely critical that it happens here at the system-wide level, it is only as good as its weakest application, and if I can build on your comments, Dr. Mash, in the department, in the school, not just the university. And conversations around how we align our revenues and our expenditure now as a matter of existential importance for for many of our universities and for the system as a whole. This is going to test us to be as engaged as we can be beyond what maybe normally has applied in many circumstances in order to work together to understand how to begin to adjust the size of our universities and maintain our mission, which is to continue to support and to serve the students of the Commonwealth. That is a conversation that needs to take place, and I'm sorry that as your chancellor, I have to ask you to have that conversation quickly and with a degree of deliberate urgency, but it is a conversation which has to happen. So thank you, Brian, and thank you for colleagues on the APSCUF, obviously, for the work that you've done.
Please, Senator Schwenk.
Thank you. We know that it's 200 or the policy isn't implemented, and I looked at this, and there's also a policy if we exceed that. the 200. Do we have any sense of where this may land?
Don't jinx it.
But Brian can tell you
That's
about
my
our
role in
website.
life, I'm sorry.
So we're keeping track of this on a weekly basis. And so I think as the numbers come in, we continue to share those with the presidents and with ABSCUF. And so we'll see if we actually exceed the 200 number. And certainly then, presidents need to make the decision with their administration on what happens if those are replaced or not. Because certainly faculty in high demand areas may need to be replaced.
Right.
I think if I,
Good sense about it.
Yes, I mean, we are confident that we can achieve this
Okay.
number.
Great, very thoughtful conversation. I would just add to all of it, at the risk of being redundant, that this is, a piece in the larger puzzle of what it's going to take to move us forward. And I think it bears repeating that we are trying to move forward from so many different points of view and perspective in terms of sustainability policies and balanced budgets and what that means, enhancing our work culture. We saw all the work on that, faculty shared governance, working with our bargaining units on excellent agreements that recognize the key issues that we're facing and put students and the system first. And this is a part of it, the enhanced sick leave payout program. So from every end, cutting costs, increasing revenues, increasing enrollment, improving engagement, it's all about the same thing. I think that's why we have so many trains charging out of the station all at once. But it's important to keep this in mind. And, I thank ABSCUF and the presidents for what they're doing with regard to this piece, and just urge that the work continue so that Brian is proven correct and then some. We hate it when Brian is proven wrong. Hate it. Any further discussion? I'm sorry. Any further discussion or comment before I move to a vote? I'm sorry. Did you want to say something, Representative Briggs? No, you're, okay, just leaning. Okay, got it. Okay. So with that in mind, I'd like to call the question. Does anybody want me to reread these motions, or we're good with considering them together? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, terrific. Thank you, Brian, to you and your whole team for, again, it's just fantastic collective bargaining work and results. Thank you to everyone for agreements that clearly show that we respect the hard work and the dedication of our employees while remaining mindful of the economic challenges we face. It's a lot of things converging and moving forward, but this is your time to be thanked for the incredible work that you all did in moving this whole thing forward. Hey, members of the Board of Governors, is there any other business to come before the board this morning? All right, hearing none, I want to thank you all again, adjourn the meeting, and look forward to meeting with you again soon.
Thank you.